Thank you for everyone for attending. I also am very happy that I also have some of my UN representative and UN colleagues and mentors and advisors also attending the webinar today. So thank you so much for attending. So to start off with the goal for everyone to be aware of the direction that we're moving towards, specifically for this webinar, is for everyone to understand that so that everyone is aware of the direction that we're moving towards to help us be stronger and more strategic as a community and respective to our groups and activities. I would like to start off by saying thank you to Karat for proposing this idea and asking Brad to come and speak with us today. Brad, thank you so much for being here. Even though you're no longer with Human Rights Watch, the community is extremely appreciative for the years, times, and efforts that you dedicated for Cambodia and continuing to do. Brad, how many years have you been working on Cambodia? I tried researching it.
29 since 1993.
29. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So
half my life.
So for 29 years, you have experience in terms of Cambodia and its successes and its needed improvements. But today, I had asked Brad to be more direct and open about the successes and failures needed and the needed improvements in our community to help us to become more focused and more strategic in our efforts. I want to state in advance to everyone here to not take anything personally, or to be defensive, but to take his ideas, opinions, and experience as constructive and how to improve our work as a community as a whole. The topics that we're going to be discussing today we're going to give a brief rundown on what has happened since our last webinar. The Commission of Inquiries moving from the fact-finding phase to the accountability phase, the mass criminal trial and the I Am Freedom Campaign, the upcoming 2023 national elections, and some important ideas that we need to discuss, such as focused improvements and strategic approaches, shifting perception, and missing opportunities and lack of follow-up. And then we're also going to talk about the current community and its major efforts, such as the Khmunity Campaign that consists of the Khmer Urgent Action Network and the online Khmunity Freedom Park. So just to get right into it, about highlighting what has happened. Brad, I don't know if you remember, but April 19th was our first webinar together. We did a strategic planning webinar, April 19th, 2020, and we came up with the idea of the working group after that webinar, and we provided capacity building with the community, engaged victims and civil society actors to be more involved in the UN process. July 18th and October 3rd, we had a strategic webinar. We highlight the importance of the community to avoid stepping on landmines, as you said, and to no longer accept partial and piecemeal approaches, and to work more cohesively, specifically at the time we were getting ready for the 30th anniversary of the 1991 Paris Peace Agreement. And then right after that, that idea sparked the creation of the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia. And we chose the October 23rd, 2021, the 30th anniversary to launch the commission because the 1991 Paris Peace Agreement set out very specifically the human rights and democracy standards that Cambodia would be guided on. So I wanted to start off with the webinar with the 2-3-minute message from Paul Hoffman, the commissioner from the Commission of Inquiry. And for those who, I know some people know who Paul Hoffman is and some people don't, but to give a background, he served as the chair on the US board of Amnesty International and the chair for its International Executive Committee. He pursued accountability for international crimes and human rights violation before the US Supreme Court. He sued both international corporations and including former dictator Ferdinand Marcos, and his responsibility in the commission of torture and summary execution in the Philippines and community companies such as Exxon, Chevron, IBM, and Ford. So please pay attention because he highlights how the commission will be moving from the fact-finding phase to the accountability phase.
Today, the Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia announces an important shift in strategy and emphasis. Up until now, for the past 15 months or so, we have concentrated on a fact-finding mission, assembling the facts and documentary support that demonstrate very powerfully the Hun Sen government's 37-year campaign of harsh repression over the Cambodian people to eliminate any meaningful political opposition and civil society voices in order to remain in power. In the process, Hun Sen has violated numerous internationally recognized rule of law and human rights standards. The reality of these violations has now been well established. The mass criminal trials now in process epitomize the depths that Hun Sen has been willing to go to keep his government in power by any means necessary. It is now time for the Commission of Inquiry and the international community to move to a new phase of this struggle and to take on a new mandate, that is to hold the Hun Sen regime accountable for these crimes. Holding the regime responsible in a meaningful and effective way for its gross and longstanding violations of international law is crucial if Cambodia is to emerge from Hun Sen's crimes. The French criminal court case of a few months ago shows us the way and provides a model on how to make that happen. The French court decision found that there was probable cause for holding Hun Sen and his leading generals criminally responsible for the 1997 grenade attack against opposition political party rally in Freedom Park. That approach now needs to be extended and expanded to cover the much wider range of significant rule of law and human rights abuses by the Hun Sen government. Working together with other international forums and voices, the Commission of Inquiry will now be moving in that direction, working to hold Hun Sen and his government accountable for their crimes. That is the new accountability phase that the Commission of Inquiry enters into as of today.
So Paul mentions that we fact find, and we have shown the campaign of repression for the last 37 years, such as silencing the media, civil society voices, political opposition, assassination, brutal attacks of critics, and violation of the PPA and many other human rights, democracy, and rule of law standards. So now, since it's been 37 years and the campaign of repression is increasing, we are at a point where we need to move towards accountability. We need a new approach. We can't keep doing what we're doing. So Brad, based on Paul's message and the Commission's work, what is Paul saying that's important, and how does this show the idea that we're no longer stepping on landmines and that we're no longer taking and accepting the partial piecemeal approaches that you mentioned before?
Thanks, Tavi, and nice to see everybody. Well, I can't really see you, but I'm glad to know that you're all out there, and I'm really glad to be able to talk to you today and with you. And the first thing I want to say is that nobody in the Cambodian community that's fighting against Hun Sen dictatorship and impunity has done anything wrong. It's not your fault that there's a dictatorial megalomaniac in power who has stolen billions of dollars from the country and impoverished very, very many people, put hundreds of people in prison, and killed hundreds of people over the years. There are lots of different strategies and tactics to take in these kinds of situations, and I've talked to all of you about this many times, and it's different in every country. I've worked on Burma and Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, China, all over the region, and it is not one size fits all. So one thing I want to say is that because the fight against impunity and dictatorship is so hard, the fact that you don't succeed does not mean you've failed. It's really hard to dislodge dictators. They don't want to leave. They amass all sorts of power, both physical power, guns and soldiers, softer power, money, cronyism, and it's very hard to move them out. And that's why we see so many dictators around the world who've been in power for a long time. Hun Sen has been more successful than many, unfortunately. And I think he's also been lucky at times. And sometimes that's how dictators can stay in power so long. So I don't want you to think that everything you've done or everything we've all done has failed or been the wrong approach. But it's always good to reassess. Let me just tell you a little bit about the French case, because that's an approach that is starting to have real consequences. I just want to be clear about why that case happened. It happened in France because a French citizen, Sam Ranzi, was harmed in a grenade attack in 1997. And therefore, he had what is called standing to bring a case in a French court. A non-French citizen would not have been heard by the judge that took the case. Because a French citizen filed the case, it's not part of universal jurisdiction. And I'll talk about that later. It's not about international justice. This is about French justice in a French court for harm done to a French citizen. I was able to be basically the main witness in the case. I presented the results of my own investigation, which I worked on from the day it happened, because I was there immediately after the attack, and was documenting what happened for the UN. And then I continued to work on my own after that. And then when I joined Human Rights Watch, I continued to work on it. And we developed a lot of facts, as has the UN separately and has the FBI. And so I was able to present all that to the judge. What can we learn from this? First of all, that old cases where there are real victims, real consequences, and the facts are strong and clear, can still lead to some form of justice in a democratic country that has an independent court system. I can tell you that this judge went up against the French state. French Foreign Ministry and the French Justice Ministry did not want her to come out with findings against Hun Sen and the people under him. And they opposed even serving the summonses to Cambodian officials in Cambodia. But in the end, because she's independent and works in an independent court system, she was able to do this. Another thing we've learned is that citizens of other countries, and there are many Cambodians who have dual citizenship or have taken on the citizenship of another country and stopped their Cambodian citizenship, if they are harmed, they can possibly have standing to file other cases. And I think this is something that your community should look at very carefully. If you live in the United States, if you're a US citizen, or in Canada, or in France, Belgium, Australia, any country that has Germany that has an independent court system, if you've been harmed by some action of the Cambodian government that amounts to a violation of that country's law. So in France, attempted murder, which is the crime against Sam Ranzi because he was harmed in the grenade attack, he was hit with some grenade fragments. Attempted murder is a crime in France, and therefore a French citizen who was the target of that had standing to bring a case. So if you have, for example, been the victim of torture in Cambodia, if you've been the victim of trafficking by the authorities, if you've been the victim of a land confiscation, if you've been a victim of an arbitrary arrest that caused you harm, in other words, you were put in prison for no good reason, you might have the opportunity to file a case in your court, in the country where you have citizenship, and name the individuals who are responsible for that. So that can be Hun Sen on down, depending on the kind of case. In Sam Ranzi's case in France, he did name Hun Sen. And as you probably know, the judge found that Hun Sen was likely responsible for ordering the grenade attack. But French law says that Hun Sen has what's called head of state immunity. So they were not going to issue an arrest warrant to the leader of a foreign government. But Hing Bun Hing and Hoi Piset do not have such immunity. And many of the people who will be responsible for the kind of human rights abuses I'm talking about won't have that kind of immunity. So that's one thing that we can learn. That's a new and different approach. And frankly, if Sam Ranzi and his lawyer hadn't filed the case, all the evidence I was able to bring would not have had a forum. There wouldn't have been a court for me to present it. So that's an initiative that could be taken. Of course, you need to have strong facts. You need to have law that's clear in the country where you are a citizen. And you probably need to make sure you have good lawyers, because a good law, good facts, and bad lawyers often don't lead to good outcomes. Tavy, do you want me to go on, or do you want to talk about that?
No, I think that, so first, Justin, just so you get ready, I'm going to show a video, a short one. Jessica Fennell, the leading lawyer for this case, she provided us a statement for the rule of law session, and I'm going to show a snippet of to our audience here. But it's to support exactly what you're saying. Now, as everybody's watching this, there are some really important points that you have brought up, and I think that it's probably opens a lot of questions and comments that people would like to make. So right after Jessica, I'm going to open the floor and take a few comments, questions, so you can ask Brad directly. So
how can this decision affect the accountability equation? This is a very important step, I think, in terms of ending impunity. It shows that if you're a repressive head of state like Hun Sen, and you think that you're protected by your judicial system, well, then you might be protected by your judicial system, but you would not be necessarily by others. And even though Hun Sen is enjoying immunity now, this will stop when he leaves power, and his subordinate, but even high-ranked ones, high-ranked officials working under his supervision with him would be held accountable potentially before foreign courts for the crimes that they commit, really progressively passing the message that you are not protected anymore for the crimes that you commit in your country, even though there is an impunity in your country. And this is, I think, a very strong and compelling message that accountability now exists. And there's no crime in the world that would absolutely remain unpunished. There's absolutely no more guarantee about that. And NGOs, civil society, victims are more and more aware of this, and are more and more using foreign national systems as a tool of ending impunity for crimes committed on the land of countries managed by repressive governments or autocrats like Hun Sen.
So, Brad, back to what you had mentioned. You said if there are victims that are U.S. citizen or French-based citizens, they have the ability and the opportunity to bring this case to. How can they do that? What are the first steps What are the first steps for them to be able to bring this case to their country?
Yeah, so you don't have to be a French citizen. We've now learned that the French court system will be responsive, so that's great. Every country's law and legal system is different, but basic thing, something like murder, attempted murder, torture, these are crimes in all countries. So there'd be no question about those crimes being on the statute books of those countries. The most important thing you have to have is clear facts. Why did this case succeed so far against Hoi Piset and Hing Bun Hing? Because many of us over many years developed the actual facts to show who was responsible. Part of it was really easy. The Hun Sen sent his bodyguards into the park on the day of the attack, and then those bodyguards pointed their guns at people who tried to chase after the people who threw the grenades. So that created a presumption that there was state complicity. But then lots of other work was done, by people like me and the UN and the FBI and others. to develop the facts further. So the judge in the case was convinced that the facts were strong enough to issue arrest warrants and an indictment. And that's a very high bar. So the facts have to be strong. You have to have a good lawyer who knows how to operate in the system. Jessica, the woman you just mentioned, I just saw, is fantastic. She's a really high quality lawyer in France. She has very strong legal partners, law partners that she works with. And they have credibility with the courts. So because a lot of people bring a lot of far-fetched, poor cases in court systems. And judges are very sensitive. They think a case is really not strong. They'll throw it out. And so having a good lawyer with a good reputation in whatever court you're filing is super important. And then you have to make sure that that you have the ability to follow through. And that sometimes means getting witnesses. You may have strong facts, but if a witness can't show up in court, that may be a problem. Now in France, they don't have what's called a hearsay rule. So I was able to tell them things that people told me, and the court could decide whether to believe me. In the United States, more often you'd have to bring the person, him or herself. And I couldn't say what somebody told me, unless and there are exceptions, unless there are exceptions that apply. But that's getting down into the details. If there are cases where people have been harmed by the state, and you can identify individuals who are responsible, and you can identify the harm, and you can identify the law, and you are a citizen of another country, because the Cambodian courts won't work. We know that. I'm not going to waste my time telling you to file cases in Cambodia. It's a complete waste of time. Then you could consult a lawyer in your country and ask them if that country's law would be open to considering your claim. And that's the kind of thing that if people wanted to contact you or Morton, and indirectly me, we could talk about whether or not there's a strong case.
Okay. So we have 3 hands, and we're going to go through them fairly quickly. And the first one will be Musapur, Justin. And the next one will be Rudy.
Do I go first? This is Shakur.
Yes.
Hi, Brad.
Hi.
A question. Hi. Question. Does the country, a country that has an independent court is, but does that country have to be part of the universal jurisdiction?
No.
To sign that. Okay. Good.
No. So Sam, just so I can be clear, Sakura. So Ranzi's case, because officially it's Ranzi versus Hun Sen and Khmunity and Hoi Piset. That's the official case. Is not based on universal jurisdiction at all. It's based on that Ranzi is a French citizen harmed by these people, and therefore the French law is willing to find a remedy for him.
Good. Question number 2 and 3 together. Does Hun Sen have to be, can Hun Sen, when he is no longer the prime minister, can the French police court go after him in Cambodia? Question number 3, what if this French judge is a good judge? What if she or he is no longer in that case? Will that make a difference to the case?
Okay, good questions. If Hun Sen leaves his office, he no longer has head of state immunity. And he would be subject to an international arrest warrant, just like we expect that Hing Bun Hing and Hoi Piset are. We have not been able to determine yet whether the French government has asked Interpol to issue what's called a red notice that would require members of Interpol to arrest a person when they reach their soil. So if Hun Sen were to travel outside of Cambodia, he could be subject to arrest after he leaves his office. Could the French authorities arrest him in Cambodia? No, of course not. No country can arrest a third party in another country without the consent of that host government. That would be almost an act of war to send the French authorities in. Now, some countries have done that. They've kidnapped people and to bring them to justice, they say. Usually it's dictatorships doing that. The Saudis have done that. Other countries have done that. But if there was a government that that didn't like Hun Sen anymore, that wanted him to be held accountable, they could extradite him. That's entirely possible. A French arrest warrant can be brought to the Cambodian government, and they could say, we would like you to hand over this person for trial in our country, and then it would be up to the Cambodian government. It's very important not for people not to think that the French government, just because it's a more powerful country and it's on the UN Security Council, can somehow go into Cambodia and grab anybody. That will not happen. She had one more question, which is if the judge changes, would that change things? At this point, Sakua, in this case, I don't think so, because an indictment has been issued and an arrest warrant. And the only thing that could happen is that when the case is set for trial next year, and it's supposed to come to trial in the second half of 2023, if Hoi Piset and Hing Bun Hing show up, which I don't expect them to, but I hope they do. And by the way, if you're listening, Hing Bun Hing and Hoi Piset, have the courage to show up. You've had no courage to kill people. Have some courage to show up in court in France. Doesn't take courage to tell people to shoot unarmed people or throw grenades. But if they show up, they have the right to a defense, and they should. And a fair trial requires that everybody's charged with a crime has an opportunity to present a defense. And maybe they can come in and show that we were all wrong, that we misunderstood what happened on March 30, 1997, and that they had nothing to do with it. One way they could do that is by admitting who gave them the orders. And Hoi Piset has already pretty much admitted that Hun Sen gave the orders in an interview with the FBI. But they could come in and offer that. They could ask for immunity themselves from France to point the finger at Hun Sen, but that seems very unlikely.
Okay. So let's take one more. And Saquon, I will when we open the floor later at the end, you'll be the first one to ask the question, okay? Rudy, Justin, Rudy.
Hello, Brad and Terry.
Hi.
My name is Rudy, and I spoke on behalf of son and daughter Khmer in Las Vegas. My question is, Mr. Musuki already asked you, I have the same question. What does French court order of indictment mean for Hun Sen and his two bodyguards? And they have the same question, and you already answered. So, I completely understand that the answer you just gave to us, but from early you brought up that Hun Sen probably has succeeded on a dictatorship. We're going to have a hard time to fight against him. So my question: you have been working in Cambodia in dedicated, and you have any special gift for us to fight against Hun Sen?
Well, it's a very broad question, and I think Tavi has plans for us to get into some of this, specifics. There's things like elections, there's freedom of the press, there's sanctions. There's a lot of angles to this. Tavi, I don't know if you want me to go into them. Maybe I can say one thing that I just want to be really clear about, if that's okay, which is there's a lot of discussion about international tribunals and universal jurisdiction. I just want to say that right now, there is no prospect of the International Criminal Court taking up the grenade attack or any of the other, what we consider to be very important high-profile cases in Cambodia. They are considering a case that was brought about 5 years ago for mass land confiscations that have led to major harms to lots of communities in Cambodia. but that's a different case. And then with universal jurisdiction, I just want to remind everybody that the Sam Rainsy case that I testified in Paris that's led to these indictments and arrest warrants was a domestic legal case. Universal jurisdiction is where a country says that certain crimes under international law are so bad that if a person who committed them steps on our soil, we will prosecute that person, even if the victims were not citizens of our country. So that's very different than what Sam Rainsy did. And only some countries have a universal jurisdiction law. And the challenge with those usually is that the people who have committed the human rights violations, and this is usually about things like war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, murder, rape, or torture, very serious crimes. Usually those people arrive in a country that has a universal jurisdiction law without a lot of notice. So we don't know about it often until they arrive, and they don't stay very long. And so what you have to do is try to have a case prepared so that when they arrive in a country, you can go to the prosecutor, you go to the police and the prosecutor and say, this person is here. To give you an example, we all know that Net Savun's family, and he have property, in expensive property in London. Let's imagine that the UK had a universal jurisdiction law, and he visits there a lot. You could prepare a case with all the facts like we just did in Paris for the grenade attack, give it to the police and the prosecutors when you understood that he was there. And they would then, if there was a universal jurisdiction law, they could decide whether the case was strong enough to arrest him. This is what happened to Augusto Pinochet, the former dictator of Chile, when he was in Britain, I think 1999. So those are I just want to be really clear. A lot of people ask about universal jurisdiction and maybe have a lot of hopes for it. I think it can work in certain countries, in certain cases, but it's complicated. And it's not the same as what's happening in the grenade attack case.
Brian, you also mentioned this in your recording as well for the rule of law session. If people have more questions regarding this situation, please, feel free to put your question on the chat on the side.
Yes.
It may be a little bit of a delay because it's hard to moderate and to speak at the same time, but even if we don't get to your question today, we will make sure that it's definitely answered, and depending on how much interest there is, we can also go from there as well. So for time, we still have the mass criminal trial to cover, the upcoming 2023 national elections, and then the current actions taking place in the community. So now to the mass criminal trial. This is really important to highlight because Thierry's message, she's the lead defendant and spokesperson for the mass criminal trial, who was arrested on June 14th, I believe. It's really crucial for people to understand her message because she has been expressing that the mass criminal trial is not just a one situation. It just doesn't stand alone. There are two important messages. One of them is that the mass criminal trial is connected to a more systemic issue. It's connected to a much broader situation that has been taking place for over 37 years. And secondly, the importance that the community is steering away from the victim mentality that we have and moving into action. And this is a very extremely empowering message. And before she was arrested and she had dressed up as Lady Liberty, she said this quote, she said, "I am freedom, and it won't just be me found guilty today. All the Cambodians who love freedom, who were genuine Democrats, will be found guilty." Now, I want to really highlight the difference between free Thierry, the idea of free Thierry, and then I am freedom, right? And this is not to say this predominantly applies with the Cambodian community. I don't want to say any other country when they use the word free in the beginning of what it is that they're advocating for. But the idea of free, I mean, there has been so much violations for the last 30, 40 years in Cambodia. I mean, we're going to keep saying free many people. I mean, Brad, in one of your webinars, in the last one, you said that, I don't know if it's still true, but Cambodia is the third, has the third highest amount of prisoners of conscience in Southeast Asia, behind China and Vietnam. Yeah. So, I mean, that says a lot. So we really need to start thinking about this quote, I am freedom. So technically, she's saying that she's saying that everybody in this room that's been fighting for democracy. So it's not just about her, it's about all of the people that are in jail, or all the people that have been brutally attacked, assassinated, and even the 60 people that are in prison for the mass criminal trial and the other 138 defendants. So, Brad, specifically with your experience and Thierry's message, how can you explain a little bit more how the mass criminal trial is connected to a more systemic issue, and highlighting for very quickly of some of the violations that's taken place, such as starting from the grenade attack and on, and how this is a long-term strategy that has been taking place, and why it's important that we ourselves should be also functioning in a strategic manner.
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, the short answer from my perspective is that Hun Sen in particular, and many, many senior figures in the CPP, never meant to implement the Paris peace agreements unless they were forced to by international pressure. And what they learned was that they could commit murder with impunity during UNTAC, and that the international community would still, and they could lose the election, by the way, and they could still force their way at gunpoint into power, into sharing power with Hun Sen, and that they could then basically pretend to be agreeing to pluralism and free and fair elections, and do the minimum that they could to get international sign-off. And I remember warning embassies, ambassadors, and visiting foreign ministers, et cetera, in 1996, 7, 8, that the commitment of the CPP to free and fair elections did not exist, and that they would pretend to by having, for instance, thumbprints on all the voters, and by having a national election committee, which they created, and pretending to have those people be, technocrats. And the human rights consequence of this was that for the first 5 years after UNTAC, there were very few political prisoners. There were some arrests, and usually international pressure and domestic pressure led to the people being released. But once Hun Sen and the CPP consolidated more power after the 1998 election, and then particularly after 2003, they've started slowly, carefully going back to their old ways. They would arrest more and more people, commit more and more political violence, take greater and greater control of institutions such as the courts, close down more and more free media, and they've been judging the reaction. And this, Hun Sen, if you're watching, hi, how are you? And the one thing you've done well is you've been really smart about playing international opinion and trying to trick diplomats into believing what you say, even though they really in their heart know that it's not true, because it's easier to believe what you say than to fight against you. And so these mass trials are the culmination of years and years of a strategy by Hun Sen to slowly make the noose tighter around the neck of civil society and the media and the opposition, engaging the reaction, and seeing that, well, the sanctions we get aren't very important. They're not really hitting us where it really matters in the economy. They're not having their assets personally frozen. I mean, Hun Sen's a billionaire, and I don't think he's lost $1 to sanctions, which is a scandal. And yes, there's a lot of criticism from abroad by foreign governments, and they don't consider our elections to be free and fair anymore. But we're still okay. So I think this last trial with Thierry, there would have been discussion between Hun Sen and some of his closest advisors about what the risks were. they've decided to take the risks and see what the response is. Now, in some cases, they've gone too far, like with Sokua. When they arrested her, I mean, there was no way they were going to be able to keep Sokua in prison indefinitely at that time. Sokua, I don't know what you think, but I think now that might be different because they're in a stronger position than they were. Or put it this way, the rest of the world is more distracted and less focused on the human rights situation in Cambodia than they were. So I think this mass criminal trial is a big test. It's a test of Cambodians inside the country, of Cambodians outside the country, and of international relations to see what happens at the UN level, what happens in bilateral relations with the US, with France, Australia, Germany, what happens inside ASEAN. And so we'll see. And that's why we're having this conversation, right? Because we want there to be a strong reaction. We want the cost to be very high for this kind of action. And that's where, I think that's where a lot of people on this call have an important role.
So this is where we move to action now. What types of strong, influential actions can we take? And also, people, you can also, participants can feel free to raise, we could take a few hands if they have some ideas. You mentioned, because this is a conversation that takes place in the community, that they feel that the international community keeps falling for these tricks. And then, of course, then you mentioned about us no longer taking any more of these partial piecemeal approaches. So what actions can we do now and that we can make sure that we're not falling into the same trap again? Kim Hun Tit, Justin. Justin, Kim Hun you can bring her up to speak. So Brad, while we're doing that, what response do you have?
It looks like
So
she's here now.
Oh yes, we can hear you.
You want me to ask a question to Brad, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's relating to the mass criminal trial and the actions that we want to take.
Yeah, recently, I think because we're talking about advocating human rights, and my question is probably brought to Brad Adams, but recently, Brad, Subcommittee of Foreign Relations of Cambodian National Rescue Party, CNRPA, has been working extensively to advocate the bill called S-3052, Cambodia Democracy Act and Human Rights Act of 2022. And it successfully passed on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So my question is that this bill is right now is in the Senator Chuck Schumer's hand. Do you have any recommendation to the Cambodian diaspora to make this bill pass, or to connect it, or to work it together so we can make this movement successful? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I mean, it's a tough time right now in the US to get attention. We have the midterms coming up, and there's a lot of good pieces of legislation that are struggling to get time on the Senate floor, because in the end, all bills have to be passed by a vote of the Senate and the House. That said, the sympathy, the interest in Cambodia in Congress remains very high. When we're talking, Tavi, about not falling for it, it's also been true that in some cases, members of the US Congress and foreign parliaments have also sometimes been too willing to accept that things were improving in Cambodia and wanted to give the Hun Sen regime more time. That's over. There's really no constituency I can detect in any country. That's important. There's some idiots who still spout the Hun Sen line sometimes in Australia or other places, or the state of Washington, the US. But I think the question is, for the Cambodian community, is having conversations with the lead members of Congress who are working on this, both in the House and the Senate, and asking them when will be the right time for your community to engage in a concerted advocacy campaign, letter writing, phone calls, and pressure, op-eds in particular states. Like, I would love to see Cambodians who are in key districts of members of the Senate whose votes really matter and who will be essentially swing votes on this. There's certain pieces of legislation where members of the House or the Senate are looking to other specific members for leadership. They don't necessarily follow Cambodia closely, but if member X or Y says it's time to act, they'd be more inclined. And calling into local radio stations because they care about this, things like that. But I think you need to have, and I don't have the answer for you off the top of my head because I don't know where this stands at this moment. I think you need to have that kind of political conversation about the politics and the timing of it with, people like Jim McGovern in the House. I can go through a list of the obvious suspects, but I think you know who the key outspoken members of Congress are on Cambodia, and talk to their staff and try to understand what's possible and when they can really use your support.
Okay. Next one is Divan Tan. Please unmute yourself. Sok Divan Tan. Okay, so we can go to Woody. Okay, then we can go to Larry. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
I wonder if there's a technical problem, Tavi, if all these people can't unmute themselves.
Yeah, I
Is
don't
there
know.
a universal mute button that's been applied on them?
No, we can't unmute them. Okay, so there he goes. Unmute.
Hi, David.
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Brad.
Hi.
Actually, my question is this. Any U.S. citizen who are being charged by Cambodia court as treason, right? Due to outspoken in social media against Hun Sen tyranny regime. How should they do if they don't show up in Cambodia court?
Well, you're saying that there are Cambodians who've been charged in Cambodia.
Citizen.
Yeah, but they don't live in Cambodia, or they've escaped the country. I always counsel people not to go back. I mean, I actually would say that I was hoping Thierry wouldn't stay for her trial because it was hard to know, but I was convinced that she would be convicted and given a very long sentence, and I didn't want that to happen to her. She's very brave and courageous, but I would have liked her voice to be free, even if outside the country. And I would say the same for you or other people. I don't know who you have in mind who's being charged, but I think the idea, and I mean, we now know more. So, I mean, I don't know if Thierry would maybe, or other people would make different decisions now that they've seen what's happened in her case. But until we see the Cambodian government release them or start behaving in a different manner, I think going back is certain to lead to arrest, conviction, and sentencing. And I'm not sure how having more political prisoners in Cambodia's prisons actually is a good strategy. So I wouldn't go back. That's what I'm saying to you. I would not go back in this environment right now.
So Brad, you had mentioned some points, especially answering a question to the participants about overall really being more influential and being more active especially with the representatives and different leaders like member states, right? So I wanted to talk about the Khmunity Campaign and where the idea came from. So the Khmunity Campaign is providing the community an effective way and advocates to amplify these voices together in a very synchronized way. We started with the Khmer Urgent Action Network, which is now having Khmer people actively monitoring the situation themselves. I mean, we have Amnesty, we have Human Rights Watch monitoring, and then many other different organizations, but to have an actual Khmer community doing the monitoring too. And then also writing letters, petitions, which is something that we can talk later with the community on and during their rallies on how we draft petitions with very strategically so that they can all use it as a community to share it, to either send to the president or send it to House of Rep, a senator, a congressman, or a representative. Now, you mentioned this terminology before, this influential opportunity that Human Rights Watch uses. Can we talk about that and how the Khmer Urgent Action Network can be a part, can be an influential opportunity? Oh, and to mention the Khmunity Freedom Park as well, which is the online rally. It's not to replace actual in-person rallies, so people understand this, but it's a place that, since they closed Freedom Park in Cambodia, why not create a Freedom Park where everybody can attend for free everywhere around the world? So it's very organized, and but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea, and congratulations for whoever thought that up. I think that's a really great idea. And by the way, it might not take off right away, but it's the kind of thing that if you keep working on, I think will end up becoming quite popular and have a lot of engagement. I mean, an influencing opportunity is really identifying strategic points where you're going to take action. It's not that complicated, or even that's smart, but it's having a calendar of events, and also being flexible and dynamic when you see that things happen, being ready to respond in a strong way. And the Urgent Action Network you're talking about, something that Amnesty has done for the last 40 years to respond to crises, and often they were arrests of prisoners of conscience, but could be other things. And to make sure that that these kind of events received the kind of strong coordinated response that would be noticed by the people responsible, by the perpetrators, and also by people who have influence from the outside. And so, we always try to identify when we think there's an influencing opportunity. We try not to, for example, write a press release or write an op-ed or schedule an event on something if we think that there would be a better time to do it. So sometimes it's just the wrong time to be doing something that involves a lot of effort and time. So that's a big part of it. One of the things I was mentioning to you recently, Tavi, is also just as a tactic, if you do start talking to members of Congress or members of Parliament, and I see someone posted a question in the chat about Australia and Britain and France, you always want to leave them with something that they need to get back to you on. So you need to leave them with an action. That's part of ensuring that it's not just a one-time conversation that it's over. So you're asking them to do something, to provide you information or to take some action and report back to you. And you also want to offer to do the same to them. But more importantly, get them to commit to doing something beyond the end of your conversation. So that's the kind of thing we call influencing opportunities, because the people you're talking to are overwhelmed with people making requests, and you need to do something that keeps your request in the front of their brain and where they feel like it's important and urgent.
Brad, can you please don't hold back, because this is so important for the community to hear. you were talking about letter writing, and important of asking. Can you talk about the way, how we should be improving our letters compared to how it's written now and how it should be written?
Yes, very happy to do that. And then I'll respond to a couple of things in the chat very briefly, if that's okay. I get a lot. I was telling Tavi, I'm very appreciative of the time and effort people take to write letters to me or to Human Rights Watch, and I know you write letters to other people. What I would encourage you to do is write letters that ask for specific action, not letters that say the situation is terrible, please do something, or please help our Khmer people or Khmer community. And I know that everybody has ideas about what specifically can be done. And I think that it's really important to be as specific and as strategic in your communications as possible, because you want the person receiving it to feel like, okay, I know there's a problem in Cambodia, but I'm not sure what this person is asking me. You want them to think, oh, this person is telling me about this problem. I care about this, but they also have a good idea. And so the main purpose of your communications is to make specific requests, give recommendations that are actionable, things that the recipient can actually do. Like I'd like to remove Hun Sen from power, but I can't. That's not something I can do as a member of an NGO or a human rights activist alone. I'd like to put him in prison, but I can't, because he deserves to go to prison for all the human rights abuses he's committed over these years. So be very specific and clear about what you want. And frankly, that's what we want as recipients of these kinds of communications. We're looking for good ideas, and we're looking for people to partner with who are strategic. We don't really want to get letters just saying do something, because you can assume almost everybody who's receiving such a letter already knows the situation in Cambodia is bad. So that doesn't tell us anything that we didn't know. I mean, sometimes you might talk about a specific case that we don't know about, in which case you can ask for specific action. So I don't know, Tavi, if that addresses your question, but it's important not to waste the valuable opportunity you have. And that's, I guess, kind of another part of the influencing opportunity. By writing a letter to a State Department official or a member of Congress or a senior staff member without and fail to like make a specific request or demand or show that you have the kind of sophistication that would make them want to respond to you.
Thank you. Yes, that's clear. And if you want to go to the chat, you can. Just so you know, we are time is flying by, and we still have one more to go. And I really want to leave the floor for people to talk to you and ask questions.
Okay, I'll be very quick, Tavi. The first one is can the Paris Peace Agreement be the legal instrument to remove Hun Sen? No. Stop thinking that. Don't dream. No. That's over. It's still an important historical instrument. It's still a treaty, but it's clear no government, not even the United States, is going to use the Paris Peace Agreements as the main way to address the human rights situation in Cambodia. That's over. I'm sorry to say that. It shouldn't be that way. You're asking about the 1994 killings of these people who took the train from Phnom Penh to Sihanoukville. I was living there at the time. I followed it very closely. I've researched a lot on this. The Australian government and French government are quite angry. Frankly, and I think someone like Sakua may know this, if you write the history of Cambodia in that period, this case was very important. It turned the Australian and French governments against Prince Ronarid. They thought he didn't take it seriously. Hun Sen pretended to take it seriously. French government, Australian governments became more supportive of Hun Sen because of the way this was handled. And yet there's nothing more that I think can be done in this case. This is now almost 30 years old. And I don't think that if you're asking whether the Australian, French, and British governments are going to bring this up as a way to get to Hun Sen or go after Hun Sen, the answer at this point is absolutely not. It's not a live controversy. Sorry about that.
Okay. Now we are on the 2023 national election. So the next Commission of Inquiry session after the rule of law is going to be the election at the beginning of 2023. And in our rule of law session, Sum An, he gave a testimony about the elimination of the democratic institutions. And he mentions about the UN, the ICCPR Cambodia review session. And I wanted to make people aware, I don't know if our community knows, but the UN was saying that the actions that are taking place from eliminating the only effective opposition political party, forcing the courts to convene mass criminal trial under vaguely worded statutes, closing independent media, jailing, beating critics, monitoring and silencing civil society such as Mother Nature is all inconsistent of the Paris Peace Agreement, which has the human rights and democracy standards that the government agreed to follow. However, the Cambodian government, they clearly, they said that while Cambodia is they chose a one-state party, which this one-party state constitutes as democracy. And the chair and the vice chair pretty much said, no, you need to, what you were saying earlier about the chair mentioned that the government needs to understand the concept of pluralism. So what does this all mean? I went through that really, really fast. Well, that means that we need to prepare for the results of the election, which we know is going to be predetermined. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we shouldn't be recognizing it, and we shouldn't legitimize it either. Why? Well, because it's predetermined. So this is where I know a lot of people have questions. And as for we should be, I'm going to open the floor for people that have ideas or questions about this. But as people are preparing and thinking solutions to share, what can we do? Can we get an internationally supervised election? And what actions can the community do to move in that direction? Everyone can raise your hand if you have questions. But that question is to you, Brad.
Well, I've said this before, and I think that it's very important to not give legitimacy to an illegitimate process. And I don't think that there are any. I think all governments have their own positions now. So the US, Canada, EU are not going to take the election seriously. Japan is going to take it seriously and pretend. And South Korea probably to a lesser extent, but also probably on the Japan side. So among important democracies around the world, I think the attention should be focused on Japan in particular, because they're constantly giving legitimacy to Hun Sen, and to secondarily to South Korea. I think you do need to talk to the EU and the US and the UK and Australia to make sure that they don't make a mistake. But I don't think that they have any inclination to take this election process seriously. But Japan provides a lot of cover because Japan is the biggest democracy in East Asia and one of the biggest donors to Cambodia. And I think it's important to have a very strong strategy on Japan, which includes, contacting the Japanese government, their foreign ministry, the prime minister's office, members of the Diet, the Japanese parliament. And you can use the Human Rights Watch office in Cambodia, in Japan, which is very active on this. But I think it would be great value to my former colleagues, and I'm happy to put you in touch with them, Tavi, if they could have Cambodians with them going to see the Japanese officials and explaining to them why it's immoral to be supporting an election process that they know is not serious and not real. I know there are different opinions about this in the Cambodian community. Some people say, yes, you're absolutely right, and of course, it's going to be rigged, but we need to participate to keep people engaged inside the country, to have them not become too depressed or too pessimistic about the possibility of participating in politics. And yes, they won't get elected, but at least there's energy that comes from this. And I understand all that. And I'm not And that's for Cambodians to decide. I'm just telling you from the international perspective, that if Cambodians turn out in large numbers, if you have a lot of political parties, there will be countries like Japan, not to mention China, India, ASEAN countries, that will try to pretend that, well, it's not a perfect election, and yes, some of the members of the opposition are banned, but look, there's this young new person, and they ran, and they were able to have a party, and they were on the ballot, and they held some rallies. Look, there's photographs of these people at rallies, and they handed out some campaign information, and see, it's of course, yeah, we would like it if the rest of the opposition could participate, but see this we're rebuilding democracy. This kind of argument, which is ridiculous, is out there, and you don't want to do anything. I think you don't want to do anything to allow that argument to be taken seriously anywhere. I think what you want to do is you want to make it clear to the world this is a one-party state, it's a rubber stamp election, it's not serious, and therefore this government that comes out of it is not legitimate.
Okay. There is a question on the side for you, and yes, the floor can be open. Just raise your hands. Brad, do you see the questions in the chat?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to respond to the question right now?
Yes.
So the last question is, can Cambodians, besides politicians, sue Hun Sen in the ICJ for crime? The answer is no. The International Court of Justice, which is in The Hague, that's different than the International Criminal Court. Maybe someone could mute. Yeah. The International Court of Justice in The Hague is for cases brought by one country against another only. So we have the Myanmar case, which I've worked on a lot, for the genocide against the Rohingya. Gambia brought a case against Myanmar at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, but no Rohingya or Burmese citizen could do that. It only is one country against another. So forget the ICJ. No, it cannot be used by Cambodians. The International Criminal Court's also in The Hague, but we've talked about that. That's for individual criminal responsibility brought by the ICC prosecutor. But I don't think that the ICC prosecutor is going to bring any case on Cambodia anytime soon. Tavi, you're muted.
Sorry, I said I want to go with Sapon first because he did raise his hand in the earlier one, and then we can go to Musuku afterwards. Justin, can you have Sapon speak? Okay. Oh, no. Okay, Miss Musuku can speak first. Justin. Okay, sorry. So, Sapon, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think you mute me. That's why. Yeah, the system really problematic, I think. And hi, Brad. Yeah, I met you in Washington State, and I talk a lot. Good, thank you, sir. Yeah, I talk about a lot about the election in Cambodia. So, like 1997, after the coup d'etat, they created the new election body. So I see the same pattern in 2017 when they dissolved the CNRP and the new election body has been created. In this perspective, the NEC is scheduled to have national election on Sunday, 23rd of July 2023. And like you said, what Hun Sen liked the most is legitimacy of his power. But I see that Cambodian people are very resilient to go along with this legitimacy and make Hun Sen almost tumble down several times.
Yes.
So what do you see in 2023? I think between Candlelight Party and CNRP outside, Candlelight Party inside, and all the community around the world and the Cambodian people that has been very resilient and know very clearly the tactic that Hun Sen has been using, the same and the same again and again repeatedly. So you think there is some prospect or change in 2023? What do you see?
Thank you. That's a good question. I mean, I'm always hopeful. I've been wrong over and over again, though, because I did not think Hun Sen could last this long. I didn't think the Cambodian people would accept it, and I also thought people in the CPP would turn against him, and it has not happened yet. Look, I think participating in the election is a mistake, but as I said earlier, Cambodians can have a different opinion. But I think it would also be a mistake not to use the election as an opportunity to organize and rally opposition to the fact that it's a fake election and that it's a one-party state and that the opposition is banned and that they have to play this game of having the Candlelight Party inside and the CNRP outside. And by the way, nobody's fooled by that. And I expect that if the Candlelight Party starts having any prospect of success, a lot of its candidates and leaders will be either disqualified or arrested. So there's no way to sort of trick Hun Sen by having a Trojan horse of the Candlelight Party or any other party get elected and then say, oh, actually we're connected to politicians who have been banned. But I do think it's an opportunity to organize and to engage in demonstrations and protests. And to keep awareness high. Elections do provide that opportunity. And again, in terms of influencing opportunities in the months before the election, it's a lot of work that needs to be done to get into the international media, get into other countries' domestic media, whether it's Indonesia or Japan or France or the UK or the US. It'll be very important for you all to be very active and be outspoken. Find ways to get stories written about how terrible this dictatorship is and how Hun Sen is one of the longest serving dictators in the world, and they're going to have yet another fake election where the people who probably would win the election are not allowed to take part. All that will be very important.
Okay, Justin. Oh, there you go. Ms. Muksupur.
Thank you, I'm back. Brad, you said that 2017 2018 elections, the international community, most of them rejected the result, called it as fraud, not fair, with strong statements. It only lasted for a couple of months. Yeah, and now Hun Sen is the legitimate Prime Minister, Prime Minister Hun Sen, Chairman of the ASEAN. How's that? 2023, if we don't participate, the whole thing is going to go the same way. Chairman and then Prime Minister of Cambodia again. So where do we go from there? Even if we don't participate, the international community has its own interests and is very short in its own memory and commitment to human rights and democracy.
Sukua, it's I only heard part of that. I'm really sorry. It's like sounds like there's wind or something. Not a great connection. I think what you're saying is that whether the international community thinks the elections are illegitimate or not, Hun Sen can carry on, and therefore why not participate? Look, I'm not going to argue with you, and I think that, you're a member of a political party, and you have your own reasons for wanting to participate. That's what you decide. And I'm not going to try to persuade you otherwise. I think that if you look at the whole picture about where Hun Sen's legitimacy comes from, an important part of it is what the international community thinks of his leadership, and how he remains in office. And what I'm concerned about is any risk of backsliding in what is a pretty strong unified opinion among democracies. Now, non-democracies don't care, we know that. And then some, like Japan and South Korea, decide that their political and economic interests are more important than their principles. But I don't want to make it easy for Hun Sen or Japan to and others. People like Tony Kevin, for example, is still campaigning about in favor of engagement to engage, and the consequences are not just the view of the election, but things like sanctions, individual sanctions, Magnitsky sanctions, economic relationships with Cambodia, etc. Now, I'm not saying that one way or the other is likely to lead to Hun Sen leaving power. I'm sure that you can't win elections in this circumstance. That's impossible. I am concerned about some people who take the risk of participating ending up in prison, and I don't know how that is a benefit to your movement. There's already enough political prisoners in the country that if one political strategy is to show how bad the regime is, so there'll be a reaction, I think we've already reached that point. So I don't think more political prisoners will be necessary. But again, I will finish my comments on this by saying, you, of course, in the CNRP and Candlelight Party and others, have to make your own calculations about what you think is in your interest and the national interest. And you may come to a different conclusion than I do, which is fine.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and I want to use this time to have to open the floor for any questions. So please raise your hand. This is just so that everybody knows, this is a Zoom webinar, not a Zoom meeting. So it works a little bit slightly different. So raise your hand, and then Justin will allow you to speak. And for everybody to know, before we end, I will, as everyone's raising their hands, I will be summarizing, doing a summary of all the actions that we spoke about today, and then I will send it to everybody as well. So Sapuan raised his hand. Justin, can you let him speak?
Yeah, thank you again, Brad. Thank you very much. You are very helpful for the Cambodian community and diaspora around the world, and your speech is very explicit, and I really like that. And I just refer to my question on the board here, but I think you cannot read from your end. I don't know. You have been going through a lot of experiences in Cambodia politics, especially you was working there before, and you were advocating for justice reform. And to these few years, I think Cambodia politics under Hun Sen leadership, he has turned almost 360 degrees to weaponize the court, to tame his opponent. And not only the politician or the activists, including the youth environmentalists, and not only the youth, but even though the Facebook user, ordinary Cambodian citizen, he also can accuse them as treason as well, or whatever. Yeah. And put them in jail as a crime, even though like put mask on the chicken, something like that, or threw the shoe to his picture on the board. So all this, what I observed from my generation, I think the political landscape by Mr. Hun Sen has been changed a lot. He doesn't have just any mean beside all the court. What do you see from this perspective? The court is the last resort for Mr. Hun Sen, and after that, everything will be better in Cambodia?
Well, I agree with you entirely. And dictators always grab two things first: the army and the courts. Even in countries where the courts are weak, there's always the risk that the courts could be used against them. So they want to control them. And when I was living in Cambodia from 93 to 98, working for the UN, and one of my main jobs was to try to help reform the courts. And we realized while they were allowing training, they were not going to give up control. They were going to continue to see them as a function of the CPP, not of the state. And they were going to install their people at the top of the Constitutional Council and the Supreme Council of Magistracy, like Khmunity, for example, who is, was in the top 10 of the CPP Standing Committee, was simultaneously running the Supreme Council of Magistracy, which was responsible for independence of the courts under the Constitution. So it was very obvious that they didn't really believe in the Constitution and independence of the courts. They believed in CPP control. So the courts have been weaponized from before, during the state of Cambodia in the 1980s, straight through UNTAC and to the present. The CPP has never relinquished any control over the courts whatsoever, because they know that if the courts become independent, they will be doing things like prosecuting human rights abuses by members of the CPP. So yes, that's where we are. Hun Sen has just as much control over the courts as he does over the army and the police.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to have Golwat, Tung, and then Woody. And then Nicole has a question, and then we are done.
Hi, Brad. Thank you for taking my call. Thank you for being here. Yes, I just want to ask a hypothetical question. I heard about the election. I just wonder if you would be the leader of the main opposition party in Cambodia, based on your 29 years of working with Cambodian regime, would you be participate in the 2023 election or not, and why? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the question. I mean, I would not. I think it's well, sorry, actually, I don't know if your question is saying if Hun Sen allowed Sam Rainsy to participate, would I? Yes.
No, I said
absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would say if you win, if you would be the hypothetical question, if you would be the leader of the main opposition in Cambodia, what is your decision to participate or to not participate?
I mean, if the government allowed the leader of the opposition to participate, then absolutely, because I don't think Hun Sen will allow the opposition to win the election. He won't allow the votes to be counted. But I think that would be an amazing opportunity to galvanize public support, to campaign in public, to raise the pressure on the Cambodian government, to show Cambodians in the country and outside and the rest of the world who's popular. I mean, we saw that when Sam Rainsy was allowed back in 2013, the reception he got at the election at the airport in Phnom Penh. We saw it after the 98 election and after the 2003 elections, the huge protests. We know that there's huge public support for the opposition. So yes, if they're allowed, but I mean, it's clear that Hun Sen is not going to allow Sam Rainsy back in, or or Sakua or others to campaign, or Kem Sokha to be completely free to campaign. And he learned in 2013. My understanding is that he was very angry at people who advised him to allow Sam Rainsy to come back about a month before the election in 2013, because that backfired spectacularly. I have no doubt that the opposition won in 2013. It's just that the CPP and the National Election Committee were never going to announce that.
Okay, Tung.
Hello, Brad. This is Tang Yap.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, thank you for coming to this seminar. My question is that if we are not encourage people to participate in the election, of course, the big party cannot participate because they are outlaw. But there are a lot of people in the country, and Hun Sen, encourage small party to participate just for his legitimacy, and some of them are his supporter and all that. So if they participate and Hun Sen say, okay, 10 parties joins the election, and that should be good enough for him. So, and then he maintained another 5 years of ruling. So what can we do?
Yeah, so you made some good points here. I mean, Hun Sen and the CPP pay people to create opposition parties. They pay many of their leaders. They pay for their activities. I mean, one thing that we know is that Hun Sen's main political strategy towards the opposition always has been divide and rule, right? We saw that with Fun Sen Pek, and Fun Sen Pek unfortunately fell for that, and they allowed themselves to be divided. And ultimately, when the coup happened, Ung Huat and Yuho Kari and others decided to play that game. Prince Siravut ended up playing along with that. There was a time when Nek Bun Chai played along with that. I can give you a long list of people who somehow thought that they were going to benefit by being divided against their own side. And we've seen many defections, although not that many in recent years. But when Sam Rainsy started the KNP, there were defections. When Sen paid people to leave, we saw that in the SRP, and we've seen it a little bit with the CNRP. So, being on the wrong side of divide and rule is a very bad strategy. And I think the small parties that play along this kind of game are simply doing exactly what Hun Sen wants. He wants there to be 10 or 20 parties on the ballot. He'd like them in total to get, 10 or 15% of the vote, but of course not get enough votes to get any seats. So he can say, look, Sam Rainsy's a bad guy. Musaku is a bad woman. We had to get rid of these elements. But, we're open for business politically with everybody else. And just look at all these people. We gave them a chance to go on TV, probably once, maybe twice. And we didn't arrest them. And so look at us. So I just think that's sort of playing into his hands. The larger point is I do not believe that political change is going to happen in Cambodia with Hun Sen in power through elections. I don't believe that. I think that's the wrong framework and wrong strategy. It's constant struggle. It's constant fighting for in all the ways we talked about earlier in this webinar. Is not plausible, not likely. I think it's almost impossible to imagine the day that with Hun Sen in power, that the CPP and the National Election Committee announced that they lost an election, that there were more votes for the opposition than them. That's not how it's going to happen. It's going to happen in some other way. And then hopefully you'll have a free and fair election after that to determine who should run the country. But if you look at it as there's an opportunity in 2023 and then not for 5 more years, I think you're actually playing, your strategy is probably not the right strategy.
Brad, I do want to mention that I know some of these questions, I want to make sure that based on the point that we are trying to also guide the community, that we're not losing that idea. But before I say that, Woody, can you unmute Woody, Justin? He has a question, and I think that this is one of the points that you brought up in one of your old webinars. Woody, you can unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Adam. My name is Woody.
Hi, Woody.
I live in Australia. I follow you for many years since you work in Cambodia. Now, I have a question. Do we allow us Cambodian living outside of Cambodia? Can we make exile government just to show that when we united, how can we do? Like contact South Korea, Japan, USA, England, Australia. But now inside, we cannot unite it. I want to see Cambodian live outside united, following your rule of law. And I also want to ask Tavi Sin to organize the leader around the world to meet like you do, Zoom meeting or whatever, because outside not united, inside not united. A lot of good people, a lot of good Cambodians live outside Cambodia, want to do something, but so far I have not seen the strong people unite together yet. I'm sorry, I'm not blame everyone. A lot of Cambodians are good people, but they cannot unite it 100%. Can you help us? Thank you.
Well, you made a really good point. And Hun Sen plays divide and rule inside the country and outside the country. But I've also seen, I'm sorry, I don't want anyone to think I'm speaking about anyone in particular, but I've also seen the Cambodia community disunite itself, divide and rule itself sometimes. And that's very disappointing, and exactly what Hun Sen wants. I mean, when Hun Sen sees you fighting externally, you're doing his work for him. And I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen that, and I've seen that from some prominent people, and that's a shame. I think what unites you in opposition is so much more than what divides you, and to allow divisions either because of ambition or because of slight differences in policies or perspectives is really doing Hun Sen a big favor. And I think it's really great that you brought this up towards the end of the webinar, because I think it's actually one of the most important points that's been made today. When you are, I'll just give you a sports analogy. When you're like a team going up against a power, and you're playing a basketball game or a soccer match, it's never more important to be working together as teammates than when you're playing against one of the best teams. And I don't want to use the word best about Hun Sen because he's terrible. He's the worst person, but he's running a very successful political operation, and you need to be united. So it's a very, very important point. How to achieve that? Well, I don't have an answer for you right today. But I think there's a really important phrase in English called "eyes on the prize." The civil rights movement in the United States always had that term in their strategy sessions. Keep our eyes on the prize, and you have to keep your eyes on the prize and not let other things distract you from that and undermine your efforts to keep your eyes on the prize and to achieve it.
So, Brad, as this is now the end of our webinar, I wanted to end with this message because I see Nicole's question, but it still relates to pretty much what we're doing. And I wanted to say that to the Khmer people, especially with Woody's question, and a lot of other people's question, I know that there's still a lot of still lack of understanding about all of these efforts that we're doing, and not, it's just because it's a new idea. I want people to understand I am one of the very few Khmer people that is in youth doing this work. And what the job is, for example, is to bring in the international people to come and meet with Khmer people, to help provide, to work together for Khmer people to work with the international people, to gain new perspective and vice versa. So, for example, the commission, the Cambodian people have been asking for years, for decades, to have the international people to come help. Well, they're here. And I may not be in the form that you expect, but you have the Commission of Inquiry, you have these webinars that we're setting up, and now we're also, and I think that is something that the community really needs to understand. What is the Commission of Inquiry? We have brought really the best minds of human rights people to come and help you, to fact find, to bring accountability. I mean, these things, it's really crucial for you to understand, how is this helping you? It is helping you. Or why are these webinars helping you? Helping to design specifically so you can ask questions, so you can better strategize as a community. And then we have the community level, the community campaign, these online rallies, because to make it accessible for everybody around the world. And also because, you know, it's difficult for me to speak Khmer, but this is where the community online, where we would translate things in the Khmer, such as this webinar, we will have a rally to discuss in Khmer about what are the main points that you mentioned today, Brad. And the Khmer Urgent Action Network, it's about all of those mobilization. It is a unity. It may not be in a form that you really see it right away, but it's about building at it. So based on, I know Nicole's question, she mentioned about the sanction, the dirty dozen. Brad, we had this conversation. It is going to be another conversation because it's a whole advocacy effort about having the Khmer community. You know, Human Rights Watch has done their job in selecting who they think should be sanctioned. Well, it's up to the Khmer community. You can come up with a list, right, Brad? Come up with a list yourself, and we can discuss about it, and we can work that way. Yes. So, anyway, thank you so much for everyone who has attended today. And I know that there were some technical issues. Some people were not able to attend. However, everyone can view this on Facebook. So thank you, Brad, and everyone. Look forward to our next event, our online rally, and future webinars that we will create. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Tavi. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.